She had been left off the manifest without explanation. No argument, no appeal, just a folded paper, one row short. While others checked weapons and reviewed final maps, she was told to stay back, to stand by, to monitor from below deck. And so she did, quietly, without protest. But when contact was lost, and the primary extraction boat failed to return, tension gripped the carrier like fog against the hull. Leaders hesitated, the situation unraveled, and then everything changed. A different name moved toward the launch bay, not the one they had trained, the one they had overlooked. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story intrigues you, please consider subscribing to hear more untold stories of extraordinary service and the heroes who walk among us, never asking for the recognition they deserve. The RHIB bay lights cast a cold silver glow across the metal deck, reflecting faint red along the waterline where the launch teams worked in practiced silence. Boots moved fast across the wet non-skid, slapping out a rhythm of readiness that filled the carrier's underbelly with momentum. Above the din of pre-mission checks and radio clicks, Alex walked with a clipboard tucked against her side. Her uniform bore no tactical insignia, just the weathered rank patch of a logistics coordinator. The sleeves pushed neatly to her forearms. Her boots were polished, but not in the ceremonial way. She wore them like someone who walked more than she was ever seen. She moved down the line of RHIB cradles, checking assignments against the manifest folded in thirds and taped at the seams. Each line carried initials and call signs. Boat 3 was loaded light. Boat 5 had 3 names and no nav listed, but she wasn't checking those. She was looking for hers. She scanned down the manifest a third time, slower now, more deliberately. Her name wasn't there. At the far end of the launch bay, an officer stood with a tablet in one hand and a mug of something too clean to be coffee. He didn't see her approach until she paused just inside his periphery. Alex asked if the list had been updated. He gave a courteous, tight-lipped glance, then shrugged. His tone was light but unmistakable. "This isn't a support op. We're going light tonight. The kind of mission that doesn't need planners in the boat." She nodded once, said nothing, and stepped aside as a group of SEALs pushed past toward Boat 4. One of them muttered something under his breath. She didn't catch the first word, but the others laughed, and another voice said louder, just enough for her to hear it, that she was combat optional. Someone added cargo brains. The words bounced off the hull, low and sharp. Alex kept walking. The launch bay thinned as the team mobilized. Red lights along the cradle rails turned solid. Overhead, the loading crane swept wide, shifting its weight with a groan of hydraulics. Radios hissed, confirming drop points and fallback signals. Her clipboard was still in her hand. She didn't put it away until she reached the bulkhead stairwell and began to descend. Below deck, the corridor was quieter. No voices. Just the deep hum of machinery and the distant churn of seawater against steel. Her compartment was narrow, spare. A cot, a storage drawer, and a fixed desk just wide enough for a laminated map. She set the clipboard down and reached into her chart tube. Inside were 3 pages, folded to fit snug against one another. She pulled the first one free, a hand-marked overlay of the Red Sea's southern corridor, each current route sketched in pencil, annotated with drift patterns and lunar tide changes. No one had asked her to prepare them. She'd made them over the last 2 years, one sea lane at a time, pulling data from forgotten reports, satellite wake traces, and intercepted smuggler runs. The second page showed a narrow inlet near a disused Yemeni dock, marked with a faint triangle, and the note entry viable under fog cover. The third held a sequence of times and tide speeds in her own script, based on the last 6 months of pirate maneuver drills logged in after-action reports that no one else had time to cross-reference. She smoothed the first page flat on the desk. A drop of water landed near the edge. She hadn't noticed her gloves were still damp. She set them beside the page and sat slowly, the metal frame creaking beneath her. She didn't speak. She didn't frown. Her fingers moved across the page, tracing the edge of a current corridor that ran west to east, tight along the reef. She adjusted the penciled arrow, sharpening its curve by 2 degrees. Behind her, somewhere up deck, the boats launched. She heard the first one drop, then the second. The sound carried faintly, muffled by bulkheads, like distant thunder pressed into metal. She stayed seated. Her bunk light hummed gently. The edge of her uniform cast a shadow across the map. She reached for a pencil stub clipped to the corner of the page and added a 4th line beneath the others. This one had no route number. Just a single word. Possible. Her gear bag sat in the corner, half zipped. Inside was her chart compass, a waterproof case, and the sealed envelope of her denied RHIB cross-certification request. The ink had smudged slightly at the edge. She hadn't thrown it away. She kept it folded between old night-nav printouts and a field manual she had rebound herself. Alex stood, adjusted the sleeves of her uniform, and turned off the desk light. She didn't need the page anymore. She had already memorized the route. Above, the launch bay faded to silence. The mission was underway. Her name had not been called, but her mind stayed on the water, on the glide of a hull through fog, on the echo of a signal not yet sent. No one asked how I knew. They just didn't want me there. Alex stood beneath the catwalk on the starboard side of the well deck, her hands folded loosely behind her back, her gaze steady on the empty water where the last RHIB had disappeared hours earlier. The wind had shifted, soft and wet now, drifting in from the sea with a weight that clung to the collar of her uniform. The fog moved slowly, thickening at the edges of the ship's bay, swallowing the faint echo of distant engines. No one was nearby. The launch crew had cleared out after final departure, and the command staff had retreated to the operations deck. She remained alone, not by assignment, but by omission. Above her, the steel of the overhead beams caught the red light of the readiness bay, but down here everything felt cooler, quieter. The clipboard was gone, the manifest folded and filed, but her mind kept working. She traced invisible tide shifts in the air with the movement of her eyes, replaying past drills against current conditions. The first time she had mapped a maritime ingress corridor on her own, she was still a junior logistics tech assigned to Bahrain. The team had burned half a day trying to get a supply run through a cluttered port. She rerouted the cargo trucks to a civilian dock 2 clicks north. Using ferry intake logs and outdated coastal clearances she had dug up from the archives, they delivered 6 hours ahead of schedule. Her name never made the report. The credit went to a scheduling lieutenant who thanked her afterward with a cup of cold coffee and a pat on the shoulder that didn't feel respectful. She didn't mention it. She just wrote the route in her own logbook, annotated it with margin notes, and filed it alongside 2 others she was working on. One of those would later be used during an unscheduled medical evac off a small Eritrean island. She never told anyone she had planned that one too. Her reputation followed a pattern. Too methodical, too academic. She worked too quietly, stayed off the command net unless asked directly, didn't carry herself like someone built for tactical environments. She was the one who triple-checked fuel lines on the landing craft, who packed extra flare kits just in case, who walked the launch bay during storms to feel the way the water pitched against the hull. She noticed things no one else wanted to account for. Her nickname among the younger coxswains was Map Room. A few called her cargo braid behind her back, a reference to how tightly she wore her hair during mission prep, like someone playing pretend in gear she wouldn't need. Once, she submitted a request to join coxswain training. She filled out the form by hand, included her simulated trial scores from the VR rig, and attached a note outlining her familiarity with RHIB operations under fog layer conditions. The request was never answered. She found the envelope 3 weeks later in the trash chute, unopened, folded around a still-clean checklist printout someone else had discarded. She never reapplied, but she didn't stop training. Inside her quarters, tucked into the mesh netting along the back wall, was a personal project built out of salvage. A modified game controller wired to a sim pad, paired with an old deck display screen and 2 toggled foot pedals she had repurposed from a retired generator rig. Her own nav sim. Not official, not connected to shipboard systems, but accurate. She had programmed the terrain using NOAA data, then manually layered wake simulations and sonar pings, most nights after lights out. She ran drills in total blackout with only her headlamp set to red. She practiced gliding into narrow coves without GPS, using only reflected sound and ambient surface patterns. She ran those drills until she could navigate blindfolded, with margin of error below 2 meters. The only record of it was her handwritten logbook, spiral-bound, tabbed by region, and filled with silent victories no one ever saw. Back on the deck, the wind changed again. The air thickened with brine and vapor. Alex stepped forward to the edge of the loading ramp and watched the fog crawl in over the swell. There was no sign of return, no flash of signal light, no radio noise bleeding through the hull. Behind her, the storage lockers clicked with thermal contraction. A rope stow bag shifted slightly on its mount. The deck lights flickered once and then held steady. She remained still. The sea didn't intimidate her. The silence didn't bother her. The absence of her name on a manifest meant nothing compared to the weight of her preparation. She didn't need permission to be ready. She just was. Her headlamp, coiled in its bracket near her belt, was still streaked with old tape along the lens, a mark she had made months ago during a night drift test when she adjusted her navigation timing based on wind variance and paddle resistance. The tape had never peeled. She kept it as a calibration anchor. It reminded her where center was. Alex didn't close her eyes. She didn't shift her stance. She watched the water, the faint roll of fog, the stillness of a horizon everyone else had forgotten. She was not waiting for them to come back. She was waiting for the moment they wouldn't. The first sign was the silence, not the expected quiet of night watch, but a kind of hollow absence that followed after too many voices went dark. Alex was in the corner bay, checking inventory tags on a dry food crate when the overhead speakers dropped into static. The room didn't react. Most of the staff had cleared out for standby rotation, but she heard it. The gap. Then a clipped call-out through the intercom from the bridge, garbled and sharp. Something about a compromised exfil zone. Pirate resistance. GPS interference. She stepped back from the crate and wiped her hands on the side of her uniform. Her boots were still damp from walking the catwalk. A second voice broke through, calmer, higher ranked, giving coordinates she recognized as the fallback grid. But there was no confirmation tone, no cross-report from the extraction lead. She walked to the comms board, slow and deliberate. The monitor wasn't on lockdown, but the data feed was red-striped. Half the field had gone from active to unknown. The lead RHIB had gone in, but it hadn't come out. In the next room, footsteps approached and faded again. Someone from the bridge team hustled past the bulkhead, flipping a tablet in their hand, muttering about signal spoofing and line degradation. The ops chief's voice echoed distantly from the other side of the ship. No second boat without visual. Wait for daylight. If they're pinned, we hold. Alex didn't move. She listened to the absence of names. No one called for her. No one referenced her nav logs or training hours or weather overlays. They didn't ask what she thought. They didn't think of her at all. She turned and walked out. The RHIB bay wasn't empty, but it was in motion, people running diagnostics, coiling gear, resetting ballast for the next launch window that would never come. No one noticed her at first. She moved along the far wall, her steps precise, her hands calm. She passed the newer boats and stopped beside the older one. Hull number 017, low profile, single engine, no auto-nav, no signature paint. It had been stripped from a drone test 2 years back and retrofitted for utility use. No one liked it because it lacked speed, but its intake was clean and the fuel cell ran quiet. She pulled the cradle release with both hands and watched the hull rock forward into ready position. The system didn't beep. It wasn't wired for noise. Inside the cabin, she reached under the bench seat and flipped open the forward panel. Fuel cell full, bilge line clear, propulsion ready. She slipped a single rolled chart from her jacket and uncurled it against the nav panel, taping each corner with precision. The map wasn't from the system, it was her own. Hand-marked drift paths in pencil, current arcs drawn at 1-hour intervals, pressure zone notations made during her unofficial sim tests. A second layer, translucent, held visual occlusion zones compiled from smuggler routes across 6 months of observation reports. She laid that one over the first and tapped it flat. From her vest pocket, she pulled a small flashlight. Its lens was cracked diagonally but still held together with clear tape. She clicked it on and checked the battery, then slid it into the side rig. At the ramp, a deckhand spotted her moving toward the cradle. He paused halfway through a call-out and frowned. "Where's your team?" he asked, glancing over her shoulder. Alex pulled on the last strap of her harness and stepped onto the deck. Her voice was steady. "I'm it." He stared at her. The lights behind him flickered once as the bay shifted power modes. He didn't answer. She didn't wait. She tapped the cradle release. The hull slid forward with a hiss, metal guides catching the weight before it dropped into place. She moved to the controls, toggled the ignition with a silent double-check, and let the engine hum to life without fanfare. The nav screen remained dark. She wouldn't use it. The compass clipped to the side panel read, "True." That was all she needed. The overhead ramp light turned red. Fog rolled across the surface in long, drifting sheets, swallowing the far edges of the bay. The launch rails extended into nothing, invisible beyond 5 meters. Someone from the bay crew moved to the side panel to stop her, but another voice said quietly, "Let her go." She didn't look back. The ramp lowered. The wind shifted. Her silhouette passed beneath the final beam of light and entered the fog. The water took the RHIB with barely a splash. No engine rev. No spotlight. The carrier's bulk faded behind her. She vanished forward. No signature, no comms, just one boat, one woman, and a map no one else had seen. The fog didn't move as much as it settled. It clung to the surface in wide sheets, soft-edged and slow, like something waiting. The water beneath the RHIB held its own stillness, broken only by the faint hum of propulsion as Alex kept the throttle feathered low. The older hull cut through without wake. Her gloves rested gently against the controls, her back straight, her breathing even. Every so often, she glanced down at the taped chart beside her leg. The pencil marks were wet now, the edges curling, but the lines were still clear. Tide angle 11 degrees. Drift correction 2 ticks left of compass true. The GPS panel flashed error, as expected. She didn't touch it. It wasn't part of the plan. Moonlight touched the top of the fog like a ghost light. It wasn't strong enough to see by, but it cast just enough silver to confirm what her mind had already mapped. The outcrop to port marked the start of the smuggler corridor. She throttled back slightly and turned, letting the cross-current slide the boat sideways for 2 seconds before easing back into centerline. Wake trail minimal. Signature invisible. Up ahead, a spotlight swept across the water like a blade. It passed to the east, catching the tip of a container husk, and then fading. Alex had already drifted low behind a hull wreck, let the water carry her with engine kill until the patrol beam passed twice without registering her. She activated her infrared torch once, 3 short pulses, then covered the lens with her glove to absorb the bleed. Her eyes never left the waterline. She had predicted the patrol pattern based on wake angle logs she recorded last winter. Same boats, same weight. They never adjusted spacing when using sonar masking, which meant their turns were late, their windows open. A burst of interference rippled through the comms line. She recognized the bandwidth. Pirate jammer. Dirty frequency. Too strong to isolate. They wanted panic and silence in equal measure. She gave them neither. She rolled throttle slowly, inched forward again, letting the fog wrap tighter. At this distance, every noise mattered. A cough would carry. A wave slap would register. So she kept the boat just above idle and navigated by instinct, counting seconds between wave crests, feeling the current against her knee where the water had pooled through a rusted deck seam. Her chart told her the next turn came after a double-stack ruin. She passed it 3 seconds early and corrected. A shadow moved in the mist. Patrol. Close. She ducked low and killed the engine entirely, letting the RHIB coast on residual motion. The pirate boat passed less than 20 meters to starboard. She didn't move. The sound faded. She re-engaged quietly. Farther ahead, the dockyard perimeter rose in chunks collapsed walls, broken cranes, burned-out scaffolding half swallowed by water. This was where the SEAL team had gone in, and where no one had gone back. Alex checked the watch looped at her wrist. She had timed the run within 2 minutes of her forecast. She reached for the signal torch. 3 quick flashes, low power, diffused, a pause. Then again, no one had taught her the pattern. It wasn't standard. It was pulled from an old coastal rescue beacon code she had reverse-engineered during her sim work, layered with a civilian distress cadence, modified for tactical pickup, non-threatening, non-obvious, but clear to anyone listening for hope. Movement answered from the shadows. 3 figures rose first, weapons drawn, postures sharp. They froze when they saw the boat. Then more shapes emerged, limping, staggering, pulling one another from the debris. 7, then 10, then all 12. They didn't shout, didn't signal. They just moved toward the RHIB like they had seen something impossible. Alex kept the light steady. She didn't speak. The team boarded fast and without coordination, like men who had run out of time but not out of training. 2 dropped into the forward seats. 1 held the side rail. Another crouched beside the nav panel and stared at the taped map. One of them, blood crusted across the bridge of his nose, looked at her and asked low, "Who sent you?" She answered without turning, "You did, when you left me off the manifest." The fog swirled around the hull as she eased the engine forward. The boat turned on a single arc. No one moved. No one spoke. Behind them, the kill zone fell back into silence. Alex increased throttle just enough to stay below sound range but above drift risk. She steered through the smuggler gaps in reverse, using the moon's position and the intake whistle as timing guides. Each correction came from muscle memory. Each shift was a note in a song no one else heard. The team sat in silence. One of them glanced toward the chart again, then back at her. Another tapped the floor once, like he needed to feel the motion to believe it. As they passed the final wreck and the ocean opened again, Alex accelerated, not full throttle, just enough to slip into distance. She checked the compass, adjusted 1 degree. Ahead, the horizon remained hidden. Behind her, the SEALs stayed silent, not stunned from shock, from something else. From respect, she never turned around. She didn't need to see their faces to know they saw her differently now. She had already done what no one else could, and she had done it without being asked. The water lay flat under the hull, glassed out beneath the weight of fog that had thickened since the run-in. Every surface now shimmered with condensation. The air had gone heavier, soaked with salt and quiet. Alex adjusted the throttle a fraction with 1 gloved hand and made no other movement. The red indicator on her wristband glowed faint against her skin, a silent beacon for night return. She had turned off every nav light, every system ping, every onboard screen. Only the analog compass guided her now, steady at 263 degrees. Behind her, the SEAL team remained silent. 12 men, bloodied, alert, their weapons stowed but not forgotten. They sat braced against the bench rails, hands clenched, backs straight. No one spoke. They didn't have to. The water said enough. The RHIB moved at glide speed, low profile and barely audible, its old engine humming soft beneath the surface. The route Alex followed was tighter on the way back. Less room, more patrol spillover from the docks. She kept the boat inside the darker lanes, cross-checked each turn with the fog's movement, used the residual heat from ruined buildings as thermal shield when needed. Every decision was measured in instinct, not chance. The first spotlight sliced across the far ridge just before they passed the sunken trawler. She had predicted that patrol's timing within 2 minutes. The light didn't touch them. They were already through. One of the SEALs shifted slightly, boots scraping the deck. No one else moved. 10 minutes later, a ripple of white noise broke across the horizon, more jamming. Further out, it didn't matter. Her plan never relied on comms. She had marked the jamming origin based on yesterday's test signal drift and planned her route to skirt it by 300 meters. The boat passed through undisturbed. Fog continued to roll, dense and directionless. The glow of the carrier wasn't yet visible, but she could feel where it was redded in the temperature shift on the current, the hum in the water under the hull. She adjusted heading by 2 degrees and let the boat settle back into center line. Another SEAL leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He looked at the back of her head for a long moment, then spoke just above the engine noise. "Who trained her?" No one answered. Ahead, red deck lights began to form in the mist, faint at first, then steadier. The carrier's launch bay had activated its silent recovery mode. No radio, no crew calls, just dim lighting and soft gate power. The RHIB slid closer, ghosting through the final corridor as the fog gave way, slightly under the ship's heat bloom. Alex didn't increase speed. She didn't correct posture or check for clearance. She knew the angles. She had studied the ship's hull profile during night dock. She had measured the drift rate during windless approach. She brought the RHIB alongside the recovery ramp without a scrape. No bump. No correction. The cradle arms moved automatically. The deck crew stood at the edge, one hand raised but not signaling. An officer stepped forward from the shadows, opened his mouth as if to speak, then didn't. His eyes flicked to the men on board, then to her, then back to the water. Alex shut down the engine. The boat settled into stillness. She looped the tie-down line with practiced ease, pulled it tight against the deck ring, and secured it without fanfare. Her gloves, now soaked through and crusted with salt, were tucked neatly through her belt. The SEALs didn't rise right away. One of them sat with his elbows resting on his knees, gaze steady on the water they had just crossed. Another leaned back against the gunwale, exhaling once through his nose like he was trying to clear the weight in his chest. None of them spoke. None of them moved to leave the boat until Alex did. She stepped over the side rail, boots finding the metal ramp with steady precision. Her posture never changed. Her hands stayed relaxed, her face unreadable. She passed the officer without acknowledgement. He didn't stop her. She walked up the ramp alone. Behind her, the SEAL team remained in the boat. The deck crew, who had seen her packing gear just 2 nights earlier, said nothing. The lights above stayed red. No music. No voice on the intercom. No one saluted. No one dared. Alex reached the upper deck and turned toward the interior corridor. The noise of the launch bay faded behind her. Her footsteps were the only sound. She didn't glance back. She didn't need to. What mattered had already happened. It was in the silence that followed her, and in the stillness of 12 men who had once never seen her. Now they couldn't unsee her, not because she asked them to, but because she brought them home. The hangar lights flickered once before stabilizing, casting a soft white wash over the logistics bay. The scent of seawater and engine grease hung in the air, muted now by the stillness that followed the overnight op. Morning came without ceremony. No announcements, just the quiet churn of routines picking back up, slower than usual. Voices carried in low murmurs behind closed doors, clipped and cautious. No one mentioned names. Alex sat on the edge of a supply crate, bent over a long sheet of water-wrinkled paper. Her chart had dried overnight but curled at the corners where the salt had stiffened it. She pressed it flat with her palm and ran a cloth gently across the pencil lines. Some had smudged. The route was still legible. The tape she'd used to anchor it to the nav panel was folded carefully along one side now, brittle and pale from the cold. Her gloves, still damp from the return, hung from a hook near her shoulder. One of them had split slightly at the thumb seam. She would fix it later. At the back of the bay, a junior crewman approached holding a thin gray folder. He hesitated at the edge of her workbench, watching her hands for a moment, then offered the folder forward. "They just posted this," he said, not quite looking her in the eye. She accepted it without speaking. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked off, already fading into the background hum of gear checks and inventory chatter. Alex opened the folder. Inside was a single-page transcript extraction event, time-stamped, labeled Red Tide Asset Recovery. The final line listed mission outcome as complete with 0 fatalities. 12 successfully recovered. Command assigned classified. She scanned down the summary. Her name wasn't listed, just a black bar where operator was supposed to be. She smiled faintly. Not surprised, not bitter, just quiet. She folded the report once and slipped it beneath the edge of her logbook. The book itself was thick with years of entries, spiral-bound, tabs frayed, water stains across the cover. She pulled out a fresh page and clipped it down. With slow, Careful strokes. She wrote a new title across the top. Red tide insertion. Beneath it, she added 3 lines. No clearance issued. No comms support. Return complete. She didn't overwrite the page. No embellishments. Just the facts. Just the truth. Written where it mattered. In her own hand. In the place no one else could erase. Across the compartment, the wall she used for training notes and rejected forms still held the taped corner of her original RHIB cert request. The form was faded now, corners curled, checkboxes left blank by someone who never bothered to reply. Alex rose from the crate and stepped over to the wall. She smoothed the form back flat and pinned a small scrap of paper beneath it. 1 word, written in pencil. Completed. She didn't step back. She didn't look around. She just nodded once. Quiet, and to herself. A shadow passed near the hatch. A SEAL in a plain shirt, arms wrapped in fresh bandages, walked slowly through the corridor outside. He paused briefly at the edge of the bay, eyes on her for just a second. He didn't smile, didn't salute. But as he passed, he spoke, low enough that no one else would hear. "Ma'am." She didn't look up. She didn't answer. She turned the last page of her logbook and closed it with both hands. Outside, the ship groaned softly as the morning current shifted. Overhead, the lights dimmed for a second, then brightened again. No alarm, no attention, just the hum of metal adjusting to movement. Alex set the logbook on the crate beside her. Her gear was clean, her chart updated, her page complete. She never asked to be part of the mission. She just brought them home when no one else would. She was never invited to lead, never asked to stand in the spotlight. But when others froze, she moved, alone, without orders, without recognition. She read the sea by memory, not by map, and brought home a team that never saw her coming. This wasn't a story about proving someone wrong. It was about knowing who you are, even when no one else does. In a world that often overlooks quiet strength, she stayed ready, not for praise, not for validation, but because doing the right thing does not need permission. If her story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. How many people in your own life carry the weight without asking for thanks? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe more stories like this deserve to be told, consider following for more quiet, powerful moments of service that often go unseen.